Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're sitting here out in the shooting shack with the new Sig Sauer M7 rifle, and there's a little bit of story there in the nomenclature as well. And today we're going to do our first video in the series on this rifle. This is slated to be America's next infantry rifle, and yeah, it's a really interesting rifle. Now, in full disclosure, Sig sent me this rifle for doing videos with, so I have no money in this gun as of the recording of this video. They're not currently on the market, but they're getting ready to go into serial production and going out on the civilian market. I don't know what the price is going to be just yet. So with all that being said, this was also chambered in 308. This is not chambered in 277 Fury / 6.8x51. However, it's just a simple barrel swap to get it there in the future if I ever want to play with that cartridge. And believe me, I do. Now, this particular rifle, I think, is something that people have been asking for quite some time. When Sig was talking about the MCX, people said, well, where's the 308 version and things like that. Well, little did they know, little did we know, that Sig was actually working on it. And this would be the rifle that we were all hoping for. So, the M7, you probably remember this being referred to as the XM5. When the military is looking at adopting a new weapon system, they'll give it an X nomenclature. The X means experimental, means it's in testing. And then once it's gone into production, has been officially adopted, they'll remove the X, thereby leaving the M5 as the official military nomenclature. Well, that changed, and I couldn't figure out why. So I had posted some information about the M5 online, and people said, well, is it the M5 or the M7? So I did some digging, and it seems around the first of the year, the U.S. military redesignated it the M7 because Colt already had this rifle out there, which we've done a video on, which they call the M5, which is their next evolution of the M4 carbine. And again, we've done a whole video on this particular rifle. So the article I read said that the U.S. military didn't want to cause any confusion because of Colt's M5 rifle. Therefore, they renamed this the M7. Interesting how those types of things happen. So today we're going to talk about this gun, talk about some guns from history that I believe Sig probably looked to for some design inspiration. I think you guys are going to find really interesting. Some of you may not even know this rifle exists at all. And then we're going to do some shooting with it. And in a future video, pretty soon, within the next few weeks, we're going to compare this rifle to the M14, the FN-FAL, and the G3, and see how America's new big bore battle rifle stacks up to the Cold War classics. With all that being said, let's get started with today's video. Take a closer look at the Sig M7. The good old M4 carbine. The M16 has been America's longest lasting service rifle. We talked about this in a previous video talking about the 6.8 M468 rifle from Barrett when the U.S. military was originally looking at the 6.8 SPC. Just kind of funny that decades later they would adopt the 6.8x51, the 277 Fury, in the M7 rifle. Now, the military has loved this gun for good reason. It's probably one of the best rifles of its kind, but they've always had a problem with the 5.56 round. I've always had a problem with the 5.56 round. It's great for intermediate ranges, it's great for CQB, it's great for full auto fire, it's great for lightweight, but in terms of ballistic performance, it just kind of leaves you wanting a little bit more when you live in places like I do, where we have wide open spaces. You may have to shoot long distance in a bad situation. So, you know, inside 300 yards, the 5.56 does just fine. Some would argue it's good well past that, and it's certainly lethal, but again, it's less than ideal. So the military has been looking to replace the cartridge, and I thought it was really surprising when they just wanted to replace the entire weapon system with the M7. Yeah, America's rifle. Still love it, but that M7's pretty darn interesting. Let's do a little bit of shooting with the M7. First, I want to talk about the primary arms binos I've been using here for a while. You've seen them in a number of different videos. These are the new SLX primary arms binos. These are 10x42, 42 millimeter objective, fixed 10 power magnification. These have a rubber reinforced outer overmold that keeps them waterproof and shockproof. They come with a neoprene strap and a nylon case. You have that 42 millimeter objective lens with these covers that stay on the optic. And then you pop these out. These are 16 millimeter back here, and you have a focus ring. And then this is, once you get it focused to your eyes with this ring, then you can focus the optics at range here with this very similar to pretty much every other bino on the market, but the SLX type of optics like this are intended to bring a lot of value for an affordable price, $129. So we've been using these out here and they've been working really, really well. All right, so we're gonna load up some Norma 150 grain ammunition. I wanna thank our friends at Norma for sending the ammunition to the channel free of charge. This stuff shoots as good as match ammunition out of a number of different 308s that I have in my collection. So that's why we're using it, because it shoots really, really well. I'm gonna load up 10 rounds. And then I'm gonna start off, I have a BDC on this Sig optic. I'll start off at 100 yards and I'm gonna work my way out to 200. All right, let's do 150. Shooting really nice, 200. And go all the way out to 250. Such a great shooting gun. Now keep in mind, with those 150 grain Norma loads, we're shooting groups about that size at 100 yards. And yeah, just a really, really smooth recoil impulse. Plenty accurate enough with the right ammunition that it likes. The weight of the gun isn't horrible. It does look a little bit thick right here, but it looks bigger and heavier than it really feels. And the shooting on it is just buttery smooth. I really want to try this thing out in 277 Fury / 6.8x51. I think that'd be a really cool experience. Let's talk about the accuracy of the M7. We fired 3 different types of ammunition out here today, and I'll throw these group sizes up for you as I talk about the groups. The first group we fired is 168 grain Federal Gold Medal Match, and this is some of the older stuff we have sitting around. We found that the newer stuff generally works a little bit better, but this gives you an idea of a 5-shot group with the 168 grain. Now, 2 of them went through the same hole down here, but that is a 5-shot group. The next group over here, same point of aim, which was right here on the red dot, but the 175 grain SMKs, Federal Gold Medal Match, put a 5-shot group right here, roughly the same size as the 168 grains, just noticeably lower. Over here, same point of aim, group shifted a little bit to the left, a little bit more so than these two, and the center of the group is right about here, 5 shots, 150 grain Norma ball ammunition, and the group size looks to be roughly about the same size. So you can see with 150, 175, and 168 grain loads, we're getting pretty comparable performance, with the point of impact shift being pretty noticeable with the 175 grain SMKs. Let's quickly talk about the features of the M7, and then we're going to take it apart and show you a firearm from antiquity that I believe inspired the design of the Virtus and certainly the Spear or the M7 that you see here. So with that being said, let's start off at the rear of the gun, kind of move our way forward. Now, there are other videos out there that go into great detail regarding this firearm. I'm not going to go into great detail. First of all, we have just a standard M4 style stock back here on what looks like an M4 style buffer tube. But this does fold to the side. You have a push button that will release it so you can lift up, and it will fold easily to the side. To deploy it, you just kind of give it a flick of the wrist, does not lock in the folded position, and it will extend. We have QD points on the rear of the receiver here on both sides of the receiver. Forward assist, grass deflector, AR-10, AR-15 style, port cover, ambi selector lever, takedown pins front and rear, just like an AR-15. We have a bolt release, bolt stop over here, so we can use the T-handle on top, which is an ambi T-handle. We can pull the bolt to the rear, push up on that lever to lock it to the rear, push down on it, and it will drop the bolt. Those controls are mirrored over here, so we have magazine release, bolt stop, bolt release, magazine release, bolt stop, bolt release, which is very similar to the ping pong paddle on the AR-15. While we're over here, left-handed charging. So you can charge from the left-hand side of the receiver. That folds into the stored position and locks itself forward under spring pressure. So that works in conjunction with the T-handle. The T-handle would be great for left-handed shooters so they can operate the gun without having to roll it over and use the left hand charging and left side charging of the gun. Moving forward, the receiver runs all the way out to here. So this is all one piece. Then the handguard, much like the MCX, slides off. There's a break point here, and this rail is part of the handguard that comes off. We have QD mounts out here on both sides, M-lock all the way around. And then we have a short stroke gas piston. On the end of the gun, we have a 2-position gas regulator, so suppressed and unsuppressed. And the gun, as it's being issued to the US military, does come with a suppressor. It's integral to the operation of the gun. YouTube moderators, this is not a modification. This gun was designed from the factory and intended to be used with a suppressor. It's part of the kit as issued to the US military. Therefore, again, it's integral to the operation. It's not an add-on. It has a locking ring, so that's locked, unlocked. When you move it to the unlocked position, then it has a coarse thread, and the suppressor comes off, and there's the integral muzzle device, which also doubles as a flash suppressor without the can installed. Now, it was important that they used a silencer in the design. This is a 13.5-inch barrel. That means you're going to have a lot of concussive force coming off of it, either as a 308, especially as a 6.8 by 51. So the US military recognized that, and they put this suppressor on the end of the gun to mitigate that blast and concussive force, so that it would be less of a distraction and wouldn't harm the hearing of the soldiers using it as readily as a short-barreled 6.8 by 51 normally would. The gun is anodized in a flat dark earth color. You do have a little storage compartment here in the pistol grip. And then on top of it is a Sig Sauer magnified optic. This is a 1:6, and this is actually being used by the US military as well, these particular optics. So that's pretty much the features of the gun. It does feed from a standard PMag or SR25 type magazine. With all that being said, let's take the gun apart, show you this firearm from the past that I think inspired the operation of the MCX series of firearms, and certainly the Spear and the Spear LT and all that good stuff. So let's take this bad boy apart and then take a look at this other rifle. First, I'm going to drop the magazine out, which is already out. I'm going to pull the bolt to the rear, check the chamber, make sure that it's empty, let that bolt go home. Now I'm going to use a takedown tool, which is just a standard round of ammunition. I'm going to kind of pinch the upper and lower to relieve some of the pressure on the pin. Pop that rear pin out. Again, it's much like an AR-15, and it will clamshell open, much like an AR-15. Now inside, you're going to find a fire control group that's very reminiscent of the AR. We also have an AccuWedge that's in here. Sig has gone back and forth in the rifle designs between little metal detents and AccuWedges. This rifle has an AccuWedge in it. Back here, there's a little textured piece, and it can go in either way. You're just going to push in on this and pull down, and this is going to release the recoil spring and the short guide rod. So there's your recoil spring, non-captive. Now I can pull the charging handle to the rear, and that's going to pull the bolt and carrier out of the gun, and then the T-handle. All right, so for basic field maintenance, that's all you have to do. Oil it, wipe it down, put her back together. All right, so now let's take a look at this other rifle. This is really interesting. Now, I've said this many times in the past. After World War II, really pretty much everything that we could come up with in terms of basic operation for self-loading rifles had already been done. And so modern weapons really are taking existing designs, tweaking them for their own use, and repurposing and using them. So there's really nothing truly new in terms of basic operation of all the various world's firearms that self-load since the end of World War II. And the Sig MCX Spear, Spear LT, M7 are no different. They borrow from other designs that predate them. This is a Rock River Arms. This is the PPS rifle. And this is obviously based on the AR-15, but this is a short stroke gas piston gun. And it has a side folding stock. Of course, this wasn't the first gun to use that, but I'm going to break it open. I think you're going to find its similarity to the M7 to be quite striking. Now it has charging handles on either side that fold away. When you open the gun up, you're going to take your thumb and push down pretty hard on this little rear cap, and that's going to release the recoil spring and guide rod. Lay that next to the M7s. Now I'm going to pull the bolt out of the gun and carrier. And look at that. Looks like a miniature M7, does it not? So you're going to find the the similarities to be more than a little obvious. Now, the gas piston on the M7 just pulls right out, so that's why that came off. That's part of the design. But that gives you an idea that obviously this basic operation had been done before. Not surprising. Long stroke gas piston, well, you have a short stroke gas piston that taps it here. This looks like a long stroke gas piston, but you'll have a little piston inside the gas block here that's going to tap the face of this piston arm, and that's going to cycle the action. Just like on this, you have a small gas piston in the gas block there that taps the front of this piston arm, and that causes the gun to cycle. All right, so now let's take a look at the bolt and carrier, because I do think for a grunt, this might be a little bit complicated, and I do foresee Sig potentially making design changes to the bolt carrier to make it a little bit easier to get this apart and back together. So let's take the bolt and carrier apart, because this would be part of normal field maintenance. Now, the gas piston just lifts right off. It just sets in that slot. You can take the piston arm off. This is your takedown pin for your firing pin. And this has an O-ring on it, which is really nice, because I always hated the cotter pin of the AR-15 M16 because it could be lost and damaged. This is captive, and it's just a standard pin. So you pull that out, then you have a little firing pin safety in here that's very reminiscent of the current generation of MCX. And this one's wrapped in steel, though. It's a little harder to get to. Like, my pinky can get in there sort of and lift that safety up, but you might need a cartridge or something like that to lift it up. So I'm going to lift up on that and then pull down on the firing pin. Now, what's interesting in doing this is that I'm using the tip of a bullet. In the military, you're not generally given ammunition until you're on the firing range or you're deployed somewhere. So generally speaking, at the barracks, in the rear with the gear, you don't have access to ammunition, so your disassembly tool isn't going to be readily available under, you know, barracks type conditions. So I just thought that was interesting, but you do need some sort of a tool to get in there, because this little slot is bigger than most people's fingers. My pinky can fit in there, but yeah. Anyway, so take that out. Now you just have this pin. You're used to turning that to get it past the carrier key on a standard AR-15. You don't need to worry about that. Here you have a witness mark on the top of the pin, the cam pin, and you just want to make sure that when you put it back together, that witness mark has the line parallel to the bore, okay? And that's how you put it back together. Then you just take your bolt out of the carrier, and there you have it. Now, putting this back together is a little bit more challenging, and this is where I think Sig and the Army will probably request a change or make a change. Now, you do have a firing pin spring on there as well, so you not only have a firing pin safety, but you also have a spring on the firing pin. So putting it back together, I'm going to drop the bolt in, make sure your extractor is facing the ejection port, hold it in position, drop your cam pin in, and then I'm going to hold it inverted, drop the firing pin in. I have to push up on the safety with the pin, and then when I get it to right about there, I can push on it really hard and get it to start to seat, but it only goes so far until I use a tool to push up and then push that firing pin all the way down. I'm going to hold it down and push that pin across to capture it. So the fact that I'm having to use a tool and I can't do it with fingers, the fact that it's all encased here, out in the cold, out in the wet, out in the dark, doing this will be a little bit challenging, I think, and I would imagine this is going to get opened up at some point as a design change. But that's how you get it back together. And there you go. Then we're just going to throw the charging handle back in. You're going to want to leave the charging handle further back than you would on a standard AR-15 M16 because you have this long piston arm to contend with. Thankfully, it's military tough. I'm going to hold it out there. I'm going to push down on it to keep it in place. Drop the gas piston in. You're trying to get this past the charging handle. Once it's in there, then they can move forward together. Take your recoil spring. It does not matter which way this end piece goes in terms of its up and down orientation. Push that in. I'm going to get my face away from it in case I lose control of it. Slide that in place until it pops. And now the rifle's back together. So very simple, very reminiscent of the AR-15 M16. So troops that are familiar with the AR are probably not going to have too much of a hard time understanding the basic mechanics and operation of this particular gun. with the exception of that disassembly and reassembly of the bolt and carrier, which I do think will probably evolve over time. We took the M7, threw it on the trusty scale, and we came up with 173 ounces, or about 10.8 pounds, and that's with the optic and the suppressor in place, no ammunition. So as configured, this gun weighs about 10.5 pounds. So that's not horridly heavy. It's surprisingly lightweight, given that we have a suppressor and an optic on the gun. So what's the recoil like and what's the shootability like? Well, the trigger is very much like an AR-15, a nice AR-15 trigger. It does feel a little bit muzzle heavy. It feels heavy in the hand if you're used to the M4, but it doesn't feel like it's burdensome in terms of its weight. And the only other thing you have to take into consideration is the combat load, or the amount of ammunition as a civilian you'd be carrying around with the gun in magazines. Standard magazine is 20 rounds, but you also have windowed and unwindowed magazines and 25-round magazines available for it, and there are drums and stuff like that out there as well that are compatible with the SR25 type magazine. So shooting the gun, very smooth, operation's very smooth, no, grinding or springs bunching up or anything like that. We've seen in some other guns. So the operation feels really, really smooth, almost like the bolt and carrier on rollers inside of there. In terms of recoil, I'm gonna turn this magnification down just a little bit and give you an idea what the recoil looks like. Pretty darn manageable. It's actually a really, really smooth shooting gun. Yeah, I mean, overall, such a smooth handling rifle. I like the controls. They're all right where they should be. Very familiar to me. Its shoulder's nice. Yeah, I like it quite a bit. You've probably heard me talk about this rifle, calling it the Spear, and that is the name that it was given. It is a family of weapon systems. So the Spear LT that you see here, which is in 5.56, then we have the M7 Spear, which is in 6.8x51, 308, and I'm sure 6.5 Creedmoor here soon, and other cartridges that, operate in a large frame receiver like the M7. The Spear LT is my current favorite 5.56 rifle, and you can see the rifle I have set up here. I have it set up for my own personal use with a light suppressor. I have the Micro Prism 3-power primary arms optic on here. I absolutely love these things. I may wind up putting one of those on here, although I do like this LPVO on the rifle. This gun is a little bit different. This gun doesn't have the side charging, things like that. The price on the Spear LT, the 5.56 and the 7.62x39, full MSRP is right around $27.99. I've seen them online for sale right around $24.99. Therefore, I can probably guess the price on these when they hit the market is probably going to be about $1,000 more than that. So you're probably looking $3,500, $3,700. We're kind of speculating that's probably going to cost about as much as an SCAR-17 rifle that's currently on the market. I imagine they're going to be comparably priced, but we'll find out here soon enough. Overall, I really do like the rifle. I think it has a lot of potential. For me, living out in wide open spaces and not being a huge fan of 5.56, it's an easy jump from this rifle to this rifle. I plan on shooting this thing quite a bit. We will do another video here in the very near future talking about how this compares to classic big bore battle rifles like the M14 FAL and G3. And that, again, will be a video that we film here really, really soon. But I want to get more rounds through this, do a lot more shooting with it, so I can come up with a really strong opinion about the gun. Right now, a couple hundred rounds in, I'm going to say that this gun is reliable, plenty accurate enough, especially when you compare it to the classic big bore battle rifles in terms of their accuracy. I love the ergonomics. I like the way that it shoots. It's nice and smooth. I love the fact that it's just a simple barrel swap to get it to the 6.8x51, which is a cartridge I definitely want to experiment with when I'm able to. So with all that being said, please comment down below if you have any questions about the M7. We'll try to answer those questions in a future video if you bring up some good points. Sometimes we overlook things and we rely on you, our viewing audience, to give us some ideas for future videos. So do comment down below. If you'd like to support us here at the Military Arms channel, the best way to do that is become part of our Patreon family. There is a link in the video description below. Also, right here on YouTube, you got the little join button and the thanks button underneath the video player you're watching right now. You can mash those buttons and support us right here on YouTube in the age of demonetization. Last but not least, please swing by and check out Copper Custom. Thank you for 15 years of support, and we will talk to you guys soon.